My family and I first came to the Physics Center and first trip to Aspen in early summer of 1965. We drove our beloved Citroën, one we'd picked up in Europe 3 years earlier, over Independence Pass. There was still a fair amount of snow at the side of the road. I think the pass had been open a day or two. And it was a dirt road. And indeed, at that time, essentially all of Aspen was one dirt road after another. Only Main Street was paved. And it was the beginning of the downfall of Aspen when they started paving streets. We had a wonderful summer. The family thoroughly enjoyed it. My wife Susie, our two kids, Catherine and Jonathan. And I had a great time interacting with the people who were here. And I realized that this was the place we ought to be every summer, that we'd been wasting our time by not accepting the invitation that came with the very first year the center opened. We'd frittered away our time in Paris instead of spending our time here in Aspen every summer. And we've come back almost every summer since, and any summer we haven't been here has been widely regarded by all concerned as a mistake. What is so attractive about the Physics Center is the opportunity that it offers to combine all the good things in life, namely physics, collaborations, friendships, the out of doors, hiking, picnics, quite good food and wine, and excellent music. And this is really an irresistible combination. I should add tennis as well. And I can't think of a better way to pass the summer. And what has been a little bit surprising is that through the years, increasingly there have been families that don't regard it that way, that regard it as difficult to come for more than a few weeks at a time. I think it's due to the changing pattern in family lives and the changing attitudes of people toward how they want to spend their summer, perhaps a multiplicity of opportunities that did not exist in '65 and are now available to people. If I think back on the years here, there are so many high points that I could go on probably for hours, but I'll try to pick up a few. I would say in the '60s, it was the chance to not only come here myself, but having come one year, to tell my friends and colleagues and collaborators about Aspen. And I've lost count of the number of people whom I'm responsible for bringing here. But I know in '66, Elihu Abrahams came, as did my then postdoc, Tony Leggett, as did John Bardeen that year, and I think also the following year, because we were finishing a paper together. And among my Illinois colleagues, also Gordon Boehm, Chris Pethick, who'd also been a postdoc, and then colleagues at large. I brought Phil Anderson here early on and persuaded him that this was really a good place to spend the summer, and he became very actively involved with the Institute, and we started a collaboration then on the superfluidity of neutron stars that lasted for the better part of a decade. I came with other postdocs, particularly Jacob Shaham, who worked with me on neutron stars, and about whom there's more to say later on, because Jacob, in turn, was our main connection to the music people, since two of his three kids have become major performers, his son Gil and his daughter Orly, and it's quite clear that the oldest son, Shai, who went instead into biological physics, could have been a major musician as well. It's a remarkable set of genes that they had. But I brought as well, now that I think about it, Setsuo Ishimaru, who was a colleague in plasma physics, had been my graduate student and then collaborator at Illinois. He came out for a number of summers and still comes, has a house here. The number of people who've bought houses here, of course, is quite substantial, and those of us who did so early were particularly lucky in so doing. Collaborations, I think Aspen was probably the center of theoretical work on neutron stars from the time of the organization of the first workshop held at the Physics Center in the summer of 1969 on pulsars that led to several papers being written by the participants. One I remember clearly is one that I wrote with Chris Pethig, Gordon Boehm, and Mal Ruderman, again a frequent visitor to Aspen, on the proof based on observation that pulsars were not only neutron stars, but that their crust contained quite a lot of crust and core was mostly made up of superfluid neutrons and protons, because only in that way could one understand the behavior following a sudden spin-up of the pulsar, which was a long time delay, whereas had one not had mostly superfluid, one would not even have been able to see a glitch because it would just be an instant pip. Thinking through other significant events, let me recall that in 1967, just at the end of the Six-Day War in Israel, Yuval Ne'eman came over. Yuval had been a prime advisor to the military there, but by then was well on into his career as an outstanding theoretical physicist. He was collaborating with Murray Gell-Mann. He came here right after the war was over to work with Murray for a few weeks, and I persuaded him to give a talk one evening in this tiny little room in Stranahan about the Six-Day War, and he gave a captivating account of the strategy that had been followed, called our attention to the fact that he had made the decision for Israel to take over the Golan Heights. He thought it was a pretty good idea for strategic reasons, but even more important for Israel to have a ski area. So that was his call. And at that time, he's now regarded as on the far right in Israel. At that time, he was in the far left, because what he proposed, and he announced it that evening in Aspen, is that what Israel should do to secure long-term peace with the Arabs was to give back almost everything. Keep a few parts like the ski hill, but for the most part, give it back, develop the good faith and understanding that maybe we'll get one day, but under very different circumstances. He was not successful in persuading Golda Meir to do this, and the rest is history. Skipping a decade to 1977, I was for a number of years the co-chair of what was called the US-Soviet Collaboration in Physics, the working group in physics. My fellow co-chair was Roald Sagdeev, who was head of their Space Science Research Institute. And what we were about, this was formed under the aegis of the National Academy of Sciences, what we were about was trying to develop effective working collaborations between US and Soviet physicists, make it possible for people to visit back and forth and even write papers together. And our most successful accomplishment during the 10, 12 years of the existence of that working group was bringing to Aspen in the summer of '77 for 8 weeks a group of 10 Soviet physicists, most of whom are still very active in research and who are among the leading people in, not just in this country, but in the world. They were nearly all from the Landau Institute. The delegation was led by Lev Gorkov. His wife came along as a member of the delegation. She was the only woman. Then there were 8 others, one of whom, Tolya Larkin, who made his first of many visits to Aspen at that time, unfortunately died a few days ago of a massive heart attack here in Aspen, which he loved dearly and to which he had contributed so much through the years through his scientific contributions. But that was a spectacular event for the city of Aspen because it was not a time when that many Soviets came to the US. It's still very much the height of the Cold War, and to have 10 here, and moreover, and people wondered about this, but I've checked in many ways, not one of them was a KGB agent. People speculated, well, maybe it was this one, maybe it was that one. None of them were. They were all highly respected scientists and really added to the Aspen scene through various people in the community. They really got around a great deal and had a sense of life in the Aspen jet set that almost none of us had as ordinary members of the Aspen community. They were invited to a party, I remember, up on Red Mountain, at which the guests were invited to sniff cocaine, which was not part of our usual day-to-day life here at the Physics Center. It made a lasting impression on all of them, and I think all of us. And so in subsequent years, we were able to get Soviets here in dribs and drabs, but nothing to that extent. We'd get 3 people 1 year, 2 years another, mostly through their Atomic Energy Agency, and again, some extremely good people, and they certainly added greatly to the overall surround at the Institute. What became clear, I think, to me, to all of the people who came, was that this was a terrific place to do research, and that it also was a wonderful place to start a collaboration which could continue from one summer to the next. So our collaborative effort on neutron stars, which started that summer of '69, went on for the better part of 15 years with a changing cast of characters, with Jacob Shaham joining the group, Phil Anderson, Mal Ruderman was part of it almost every year, with Ali Alpar, who had been a student of Phil's at Cambridge, then a postdoc with Mal, then a postdoc with me, came out for about 3 years with his family. And we were really, it was an opportunity to gather together in the summer and sort of continue the work that was left over from the preceding year, because by then nearly all of us were dispersed to institutions all around the world. As I remarked earlier, this was a wonderful place to bring a family. Our children grew up here, and from the ages of, well, let's see, Catherine was 10, Jonathan was 6 when we first came in 1965. We learned to hike mainly under the aegis of Randy and George Stranahan, and with the help of the Kais, Peter and Eva and their family. Peter and Eva and company were around for only a few weeks that first summer. That's the summer Susie and I had never really hiked before, so we learned how to hike. We had masters as guides in doing this, and I still have very clear memories. George's knees were still in good enough shape that he went on all our hikes, of George teaching Jonathan to go down to a snowfield. We went up to Grizzly Lake that summer. It was a big snow year, and it was absolutely filled with snow. And on the way back, George took Jonathan on his lap and then sort of slalomed down sitting down a steep snowfield, and introduced him to what you could do. And our thought was that kids could go do almost anything their parents could do, so that I remember the Rudermans and the Pines and Peter Goldreich and our various kids, the youngest of whom were like 6 and 7, going up Castle Peak and going on several other major hikes, and taking the attitude that the kids can do anything. And more or less that turned out to be true. they encouraged one another, and that made a big difference, I think. And our experience was that one's children continued to enjoy coming and became part of the Aspen family until they were about 16 or 17. They started working for the Physics Center somewhere around 14 or 15. Jonathan fixed bikes a couple of summers. Catherine and Lisa Galman and Nikki Kaus worked as maids one summer and learned far more than they ever wanted to know about the lives of our participants. And they would giggle to one another about it, but never told their parents, to the best of my knowledge, of what it is they found out. It was a great place to bring up family. And we've started now, we have grandchildren, and as soon as they're a little more portable, we hope they'll be out every summer. They've made one trip here and all had a great time, but that's a 3-week-old and a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. We have high expectations for 3 or 4 years from now, taking them all up in the mountains and so forth. I should mention that another opportunity that came the way of the Physics Center really began with that workshop on pulsars, because that gave us exposure in the astronomy and astrophysics community, of which I was very much welcomed as a new member. And we had the idea with Sterling Colgate of then putting together a group of sort of advisors in astrophysics who could organize a summer program here, because there was nothing of that kind anywhere in the world. I think the original group was Al Cameron, Sterling, George Fields, and I were the 4 organizers as we got that started. And through Al and George, who had very good connections in Washington, we got early support from NASA, which has continued today. And astrophysics has become a very active and vital part of our program through the years. And it all began really with the pulsar workshop and the initial exposure of people working in astrophysics to Aspen and the joys and delights of coming here every summer. I think we all took it for granted that the various Nobel laureates of our acquaintance would enjoy being here, and certainly Hans Bethe set the way. Hans first came to Aspen with his wife Rose in 1940. They came through as part of a trip west, and they loved to come. Dick Feynman came twice, and the memory that all of us have was of his second time here, at which point he had a 4-year-old son, Carl, and Dick at a picnic at the Lincoln Creek campgrounds organizing the kids in a race. He said, let's have a race. And he would race against all the assembled children from ages 3 up to 10, say, and he made it even because he ran backwards. And the sight of this group running, and the kids going for dear life, and Feynman going all out to try to keep up with them. It was a measure of his originality, that this is how we organized events with children. For the most part, I think when Dick was here, he just worked on his own thing. He did not, throughout his career, he did not collaborate a lot with people, other than had a few absolutely great students, of whom one of our founders, Mike Cohen, was, I think, his first really well-known student. But Dick was great to have around. We kept trying to get him to come back, but we only succeeded that one time when his son was 4. Probably the year was 66 or 67. I should say something about picnics, which were a big part of our social life here, picnics and cocktail parties. We would have weekly picnics, and typically George and Betsy Stranahan would decide where we would go, and we just went to all different parts of the mountains. It was we would never have thought it a good idea to have a picnic here on the grounds. I mean, the picnics were a time to explore different venues. One picnic, we went up to the end of the road that goes up to Grizzly Lake and beyond to Ruby Park. And I remember one of the visitors at that time had an old Porsche which he attempted to bring all the way up that road, and of course failed somewhere along the line. But that was one of our more exotic destinations as far as picnics were concerned. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that we were a self-organized group. I was sort of amazed to find out how many of us had served in various administrative positions here at the Physics Center. And it was natural, I guess, for those of us who were activists, a certain number of us were, to join in supporting Marty Block as he wanted to start a winter conference. And we took the point of view, this can only add to the Aspen experience in the physics community, that here we were by then in 1985 with quite good physical surroundings, which we weren't using for more than the summer months, and typically our program was more like 12 or 13 weeks. So we got started. The first year, Susie and I guess, were in Los Alamos just before then. We drove here with Murray Gell-Mann as a passenger. That was the good news. The bad news was that it was a set of very icy patches, particularly coming over Tennessee Pass. Susie and I were not at all sure that we could make it, and we enjoined Murray, who was sitting in the back seat, to try and stop talking, which he refused to do. So I was somewhat distracted as Murray is explaining to us the better part of an hour and a half all about the mind-brain connections. But thanks to Susie being my monitor in the front seat, we made it here successfully that winter. I guess it was probably January, that first winter conference. And I think it was on all of physics. It was not a specialized topic, that we started doing it on special topics after that year. In trying to think about eras, I would say that there was the wonderfully unorganized era, which was the time of the 60s. Somewhere along the line, we started having workshops, and that changed in many ways the character of the Physics Center, because prior to that time, you might come with a few colleagues planning to work together or not, but you came with your own research program. Once one had a workshop, it was a far more organized affair. Instead of there being one talk a week, which was the pattern in the 60s, you would have 2 or 3 or more talks connected to a given workshop. And before we knew it, suddenly we had not one workshop at a time, but more like 2, occasionally 3, and evolved into our present structure of the order of 12 or so workshops each summer. That, I think, has changed the center. It's been a good thing. It's probably meant we contribute more effectively to physics as a whole, and our contributions to physics have been extraordinary through the years. I think it has interfered with the kind of sense of laissez-faire and freedom, and the sense that you could really spend most of the time doing your own thing. You didn't feel impelled to go, if you were part of a workshop, to go and listen to talks and be part of a more organized endeavor. So I think in looking at the evolution of the center, there was sort of the first phase was total disorganization, and that was terrific. Then there was bringing Fermilab here, which really changed the character of the Physics Center, because it meant that many more people could come and many more people knew about us. And it meant that we were a major presence in the particle physics community. That was the good news. It was a mixed thing because the result was that, for the most part, particle theorists tended to dominate the scientific agenda of the Institute for many years until the condensed matter people and the astro people sort of gradually fought back, not to parity, but to something resembling it, a set of negotiations that are still going on. I think it is still a spectacular place to come for the summer. It is great fun to organize a workshop here. It's great fun to be a participant in a workshop, but the best thing of all is just to come with your own research agenda and one or two colleagues you like to talk to and work away at your own thing.